It's official, my friends. Dragon Age the Veilguard has officially flopped. It's officially official. We all saw that coming, let's be honest. Regardless of the reasons why, of which there were multiple as we know, it's a shame and I want to see that series succeed. I love Dragon Age Origins. And I wanted to make this video primarily because I am a fan of BioWare. And of, I won't say EA, because that's not true, but some EA published games I'm a fan of. And just video games in general. So I want to see them succeed and I want to take a look at where they may be going next. So EA, as I was saying, has published some of my favorite games. Such as the Battlefield series, Mass Effect, which is from BioWare, who are the developers of Dragon Age, if you didn't know, specifically. Some very nostalgic old Harry Potter games that were actually a lot of fun back in the day. Super Mega Baseball, if you'd never played it. Better than the show, if you ask me. Dead Space, of course. Need for Speed is a classic. I used to play Hot Pursuit all the time. And just many more games. Notice I didn't mention a single one of their sports games, by the way. I do love to play those, but I can't bring myself to buy them year after year and buy that copy and paste and support that. All they're doing really is updating the rosters, messing around with one or two mechanics, maybe a slight graphical update in the lighting, and changing something to do with the Ultimate Teams, but it's not worth it to me, so I definitely don't buy them every year, but I will admit, they're fun. EA has long been one of the classic villains of gaming. Now that sounds intense, but if you know EA, you know greed. They're pretty much synonymous, those two words, EA and greed, with each other among gaming circles. Their games have been vilified, and their reputation as a publisher has taken a hit for a long time now. Whenever I personally think of EA, I go straight to microtransactions, loot boxes, weird online passes that come with my games for some reason that I need, and ruining good franchises after taking them over. Stuff like that. So they were among the first real proponents of microtransactions. Something we all know and love to this day, of course. They're the same publisher that said single-player games are dead. Which is, as we've seen with games like Suicide Squad, from the once-beloved single-player developer Rocksteady, who made the Arkham series that are amazing single-player games, is not true. PlayStation is also learning this tough lesson. Concord. I've already mentioned their annual sports franchises that they release where they copy and paste with a slightly updated roster and almost no new mechanics. Got NHL, Madden, FIFA. There's no reason to buy them as far as I can tell unless you're totally committed to getting your new Ultimate Team, and I get that grind. I have a friend who really likes to play, so I understand it, but to me it's just EA being EA, and I can't support it. You know, the Ultimate Team game modes are designed to suck people dry of their cash, and I know you don't have to spend cash, but it's something you can do and are tempted to do a lot. And people oblige, so that's why they keep doing it. But they've also had a big hand in running down some beloved franchises like I was talking about, such as DICE, who made Battlefield, Maxis, who made Sims, and BioWare, except for Mass Effect. Obviously we can talk about 3 and Andromeda, but 1 and 2 are still great. But nothing to me has been as good as Knights of the Old Republic. BioWare, I could do a whole video on them, but they have not been the same since EA took them over. As evidenced by Dragon Age the Veilguard and Dragon Age Inquisition, which did win Game of the Year, but was the first Game Awards, and I just think that was a dub. I think a lot of people do. So we won't get into that, but clearly they have not had the most positive impact on Dragon Age, let's just say. Their games have also been terribly optimized, such as Jedi Survivor. Awful release, and to this day there's still some bugs in the PlayStation 5. I don't know about PC, but to this day there's still some problems with the PlayStation 5 edition of Jedi Survivor. So there's just a lot to be said, a lot of bad things. There's also the Battlefront monetization, Battlefront 2, with loot boxes, and that was just a terrible story. And they're just bad news bears. So the question is, will they ever learn? Or an even better question that I think needs to be asked is, does it even matter if they do learn? I say that because they have so many other forms of cash flow that they may not need to do better with their other franchises. Kind of like if you look at Gamefreak with Pokemon. There's just... They know that they can get away with a lot, so they release something that's as terribly optimized as Scarlet and Violet, and they know it's still going to be one of the best-selling Pokemon games of all time, because it's Pokemon. And same thing with EA. Because it's Madden, we can just put it out there, people will buy it. Happens every year, people get excited for it. Hopefully that changes, by the way, with Game Freak and Pokemon, because they're taking their time now. But EA will never take a year off of Madden. I just sneezed, so my eyes are tiny right now. But all that being said, what's next for EA? The original question that I formulated when thinking about this video, and what's next for BioWare too. So here's a picture of some good stuff, hopefully, that they're working on. It's all in theory, but to start the list, we have Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare 3. I don't know if you ever played the first two games. The first one was fun, the second one I think was even better. It had sort of a cool hub world, and you sort of had a story that you could walk around in, and the multiplayer was interesting and just very fun and balanced, and you could play so many cool different zombies and plants. And I just thought it was fun because I liked the original Plants vs. Zombies game back on the App Store, and I played it on the 360 as well. It was just a lot of fun, and so it's cool that they made a successful and fun version of it for multiplayer that actually feels good, looks good, and is interesting. So I'm excited for Garden Warfare 3. However, these type of games are not around as much. That being the weird online shooter sort of has a little mini story hybrid mode. So I am worried about how well it's going to perform, because there really isn't much of a market for a game like this anymore. Kind of makes me think of something like Titanfall, which we can get into that whole story with EA too. I didn't mean to bring them up, Freudian slip there, I guess, but I just feel like I'm worried that people won't support this as much as maybe it should, because I feel like it's going to be a good game. It's going to be fun. But it does feel like this could be the end of that series, and not Plants vs. Zombies, but the Garden Warfare multiplayer series. I wish the best for PopCap Games. I loved Peggle too, but this particular one has me excited, but I don't know if it's going to catch on. It's been a while since 2 was out. So their next game, I'm not going to go through every one, but just a few of these, is called Rust Heart. It is a game about befriending a big robot, and you can sort of customize him, and you are just going on a journey together. It can be a co-op experience. It's developed by Glowmade Studios, who we've never really seen anything from. They haven't released anything yet. They're working on another game too. But this one does sound very interesting, and I love a good co-op game. And it sounds like there aren't many opportunities for weird monetization or EA-ifying this game. Alright, so just a few more that they've got too. It's a pretty interesting list. There's some kind of Star Wars strategy game. There's some game by Steve Fukuda, who works at Respawn, who, if you don't know, like I was talking about a little earlier, they're the minds behind Titanfall and Apex Legends. And we know that they've got EA's full trust with after Apex, so I'm excited for that. Titanfall 2 was an awesome game, and I feel like it's become a classic, like a cult classic, and a game that everyone loves to call underrated, which, yeah, it was. I don't know if it is now because enough people talk about it, but awesome game, awesome series, so I'm excited to see what he's up to in the studio for them. Jedi Survivor sequel, that makes sense. You've got the next Battlefield game, the new Mass Effect game, which looks very interesting. We don't know anything about it, so me saying interesting just essentially means it's cool. I'm glad that they're going back to the series. I'm glad it still exists. I'm glad BioWare has possibly one more shot to prove what they're worth. Hopefully they learn from Dragon Age the Veilguard. I wanted to make this video about what they could learn about what happened with Dragon Age Veilguard and apply that to Mass Effect, but instead I decided to talk more broadly about EA. EA also has been working with Marvel to create multiple Marvel games, which this kind of flew under my radar. I don't know if I knew this actually, but it's very interesting. They're working on an Iron Man game, a Black Panther game, and another Marvel game as well. And it seems like they might be working on this at the perfect time, because if you've been following my channel at all or you tune into my live streams, you know that I like Marvel Rivals. And what it's done to kind of help the Marvel image in my eyes is pretty big. I know that it's not, it wasn't a huge cultural event, but for me anyway, it put Marvel back on the map. And just a few interesting details about these games. The Black Panther game appears to be an open world sandbox. These are all based on job postings. And the Iron Man game is going to be single player and open world, so it's great to see. My one worry is that they will take these IPs, Iron Man, Black Panther, and find a way to monetize them. I am all about clean slates. Talked about it in my last video. I want to find the silver lining. And for EA, they hide the silver lining. You have to dig and dig and dig, and even then you're not sure if it's there. There's just no lining at all. Generally it's just there. Bad things. So I want them to publish good games. You know, there's a new Sims game coming out. That's exciting. Sims are cool. It's a bummer. I know that we were all really excited for the Star Wars first-person shooter. I don't know if we were all excited. I was interested in the new Star Wars first-person shooter that Respawn was working on. That's really why I was interested. That got canceled, unfortunately. So, yeah. Anyways, they have an interesting road ahead of them. I just want to touch on also, instead of making a whole video about it, just making a few points right now about it. What can EA learn from Dragon Age the Veilguard and what they've done with other franchises or Jedi Survivor? An easy one: optimize your games. That's an easy thing to learn. Should know that by now. We'll see if they learn that and take the time and delay if they have to. I'm always a fan of delay instead of just okay. That's what I say. And when it comes to Dragon Age the Veilguard, what isn't there to learn? You know, that game was, it was just sort of a mess culturally. I would say don't try too hard to send a message. I personally don't think they were pushing it in people's faces like some people do. There were a few scenes of dialogue that did that. I would say don't even go there. As for some other lessons that don't even talk about the cultural stuff with it, because I don't think that was the crux of the issue. The real issues were bad writing, and they didn't stay true to what made Dragon Age the Veilguard, or Dragon Age rather, Dragon Age. And that's something they're going to have to remember. BioWare specifically is going to have to remember when they're working on the new Mass Effect game. They need to remember, they need to scrap Andromeda, take a good look at Mass Effect 3, take the good parts out, specifically focus on 2 and 1 because those are the best, and bring out what makes those games great. Focus on that. Why? Don't try to do too much. Keep Dragon Age, Dragon Age. That's what people want when they buy a Dragon Age game. Keep Mass Effect, Mass Effect. And to elaborate on this a little more, I don't want to just keep saying keep this, keep that. What makes these games great, what makes BioWare great, and what made them great? When you're talking about Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, what makes them so great in the past, it was their character building, their RPG elements. We've talked about all this before, but you need to stay true to the tone of the games too. Mass Effect, what made the first 2 games great were the characters, your companions, how you could form relationships with them, how you hated some because of what they said, or you liked others because of what they said, how the actual tones of the game made you feel like, I am in a massive world. This is Game of Thrones style. The world's going to end if I don't figure this out, and I have a lot of cool people around me who have their own stories that I can go explore. Just do that, and have good writing. Don't have cringy writing. Just write good stories. Don't do the whole, deep as a, wide as a lake, deep as a puddle thing. Just have good dialogue. Literally, what I would suggest for them, it seems like, is to have your writers have actual conversations with people. I'm not saying they weren't. I'm also not a video game writer. I have written a book and I write stuff, but I'm not a video game writer. I don't want to take anything from them. But I also am going to say, conversations in the game are not realistic. You don't have those conversations with people, especially under the circumstances that they were happening sometimes. So just be realistic to a degree. Make people cool. If you're going to talk about emotions, weave it in seamlessly like real people do. There's a lot that they can learn. They have to use these games, the past few releases in each of the series, as learning experiences. For EA specifically, don't monetize these games like you do. Look at what NetEase is doing with Marvel Rivals. Be smart. I wouldn't put it past NetEase to backload everything, but be smart. Earn that consumer favor. And what NetEase hasn't proven yet is that they can keep it, but that's what EA should do. Of course I'm going to say that. Keep that consumer favor. People are smart enough to see what type of tricks they're up to. And on top of all that, don't ruin these franchises you're working with, like you did with DICE and what's happening with BioWare. And you can attribute it to the developers themselves, of course. But a lot of it started to happen, and I distinctly remember people being worried when EA took over these developers. And sure enough, they did do slimy stuff. Again, Star Wars Battlefront. They did do exactly what we thought they'd do. So they've lost our trust. And they need to earn it back. So they need to be able to harbor their own franchises and keep these games going. So anyways, that's my little EA rant. And there's a lot that they can learn from all of these games. But those are what they need to focus on. So thank you for watching. I really enjoy a lot of these games, like I said, and BioWare, and I want them to do well. So if they can use these games as learning experiences and focus on themselves and just write good games while keeping the same tone, that's the important thing. The Veilguard did not feel like Dragon Age games. It was very cartoony. Keep that tone. People want the same tone. They want to play a game that feels like it belongs in the series if it's going to have the same name as games in that series. So anyways, thanks for watching. Bye. Bye. The biggest thing that I think would help EA too is competition. It's a classic term. You know, competition breeds innovation. And right now, EA doesn't have much of that. They're so comfortable sitting on their laurels. They have Apex, and they have the sports franchises where they just don't have competition. And that allows them to just put out an annual lazy release, and they know they're going to get paid. And I do think that the single player pressure that is being put on them by the player bases is good, and that's what's needed. But on top of all of that, on top of the last thing I just said, they also need to just be a better company. I don't know if anyone knows, but they also don't have a history of treating their employees the best. Stories like this seem to keep coming out among the gaming industry. For EA specifically, it all started in 2004 when there was a blog post published by the spouse of someone who worked there, and she said that they were working 80 hours a week, and the classic video game industry crunch time style work environment without overtime compensation was happening to her partner. And they were told if they couldn't handle the pressure, just work somewhere else. And since then, EA has settled 2 class action lawsuits and promised to improve worker conditions. But of course, the abuse continues, and reports of the abuse continue, I should say. And it's just, I don't see any recent reports of this, so I hope conditions have improved. And they haven't. We'll see if they release another Anthem. I mean, that's an all-timer. But I fully expect EA to EA-ify this, but I really want them to succeed, and I am a positive person overall, so here's hoping that they have improved conditions, but that's something else they need to improve on. The crunch time conditions that clearly aren't working. In my research here, looking at BioWare and EA, I came upon one of our modern masterpieces. How could I have forgotten it? Anthem. And if no one knows the exact story behind Anthem, well, it was a total flop. And it appears that this is an important thing to point out. EA had nothing to do with the game's development, but it does appear that this is specifically for BioWare. EA takes a lot of the blame for Anthem because they're EA, but there were a lot of mistakes that BioWare made with EA too. And they spent 4 of the years working on it, doing pretty much nothing as far as I can tell. And then EA started to apply pressure, but BioWare had messed around, and then they release a game like Anthem, and no one was excited for it anyways. I think there was a little bit of excitement, but when you think BioWare, you don't think Anthem. We've already talked about this. You think RPG. And EA is not to blame for all of this. There are developers too. EA is the publisher. They set deadlines and do their side of the job, but the developers that they're working over also are making some big mistakes. And when it comes to again, I don't really play these games, but according to what I've seen online, it seems like people were just upset with the lack of new features and innovation, which is a little confusing because I feel like that's always sort of how their sports games are, but I guess the in-game physics and goal scoring mechanisms were weird. Yeah, and then it received a huge update, but the problem is that it's already underperformed, and now EA's stock has taken a dip down 20% this year. So that with Dragon Age, and I mean, they're not in the best place. They don't have the lowest stock price, that's for sure, but they still need to earn back favor because they will keep declining like this if they keep making the mistakes that they're doing. So in conclusion, EA has a long way to go, and again, it's about the developers too. They both have a long way to go, but EA has been the overseer of many of these poor decisions and has allowed them to pass through, and we'll see what they can do. You know, they have some interesting ideas coming up, but in terms of what's really next for them, well, I wouldn't say it's their entire company at stake, but I would say that what it's really about is their developers. And over time, if the developers go, what happens to the publishing company, you know? So alright, so this was a long one. So, I have to sneeze, but thanks for watching. See you in the next video.